She got slapped mid-flight for not belonging, then revealed she owned the entire airline. They say money talks, but sometimes silence says more, especially when that silence is paired with side eyes, fake smiles, and assumptions that hit like bricks. It was a cool morning in Santa Barbara. Private tarmac, light breeze. A sleek Gulfstream G650 sat polished and still, ready for its cross-country flight to Newark Liberty. The crew was already on board, prepping for a quick executive hop east. And then she arrived. No red carpet, no security detail, no designer luggage, just a woman in her late 30s, wearing black joggers, a faded hoodie, and beat-up Adidas sneakers. She was scrolling on her phone, her afro pulled into a loose puff, calm, unbothered. Her name was Dr. Nadia Holston, but nobody said her name out loud. Not yet. Catherine Mallory, the lead flight attendant, spotted her from inside the cabin. She leaned slightly over to the co-pilot and asked with a raised brow, "Do we have a last-minute passenger that ops didn't clear?" He shook his head. "Not that I know of." Nadia stepped onto the plane like she'd done it 100 times before. Not flashy, just familiar. Catherine was already halfway down the aisle to meet her. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said, her voice dipped in sugary authority, "this jet is reserved for a private charter." Nadia barely looked up from her phone. "I know. I'm not sure you do," Catherine said, standing firm in the aisle. "This is Flight 221 to Newark, chartered by Meridian Lux Aviation for a confidential client." Nadia tucked her phone into her hoodie pocket and looked her in the eye. "I'm the client." Catherine didn't laugh, but you could see the smirk trying to escape. "Right. Do you have some kind of confirmation? Because I don't." "Hey, Catherine," another flight attendant called from the galley, a younger guy, probably mid-20s. "She's on the manifest. Top of the list." Catherine froze, lips parting just slightly. "I see." Nadia walked past her slowly, not in a smug way, just like someone who's tired of this exact moment playing on repeat. She didn't say anything, but the air shifted. You could feel it. But Catherine wasn't done. She whispered to the other flight attendant, "Something's not right. There's no way she's who she says she is." If Catherine had just sat down and done her job, this story would have ended right there. Instead, she made a choice. She watched Nadia place her carry-on in the overhead, then sink into the cream leather seat like she owned the place, legs crossed, eyes back on her phone, minding her own business. That bothered Catherine. The rest of the cabin was empty, minus a discreet older couple seated toward the back, guests of the same charter, both heads down in newspapers. The engines hadn't started yet. There was still time. Catherine straightened her skirt, took a breath, and approached again, this time leaning slightly over Nadia's seat. "Ma'am, I need to ask again," she said, her voice flatter now, less sweet. "Do you have identification? I just want to verify something." Nadia looked up slowly. "Is there a reason I'm being asked twice when your colleague already confirmed I'm on the list?" Catherine didn't flinch. "Standard protocol." "No, it's not." Nadia's tone wasn't raised, but it was sharp, precise. It cut the air clean in half. "I've flown Meridian Lux 12 times this year," she continued. "I don't remember standard protocol involving being interrogated while boarding my own plane." The younger attendant, whose name tag read Tony, called from the galley again. "Catherine, we're good. Everything's cleared. Ground team just confirmed. Let it go." But she didn't. She moved closer, her voice lower. "Look, I'm trying to protect our clients. This plane is chartered under a high-security clearance. We don't get people showing up in sweats and hoodies without it raising red flags." Nadia blinked. "So the problem is my clothes." "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." There was a pause, and then Catherine took one more step. "I don't know who you think you are, but this kind of entitlement doesn't fly here. This is a professional environment." Nadia stood up now, eye to eye, taller than Catherine by maybe 2 inches, calm, composed, but now fully present in the moment. "I didn't think I was anybody." "You did," she said. Tony stepped forward, finally placing himself between the two women. "Let's dial it back. All right. We've got clearance. Let's just." But Catherine wasn't hearing it. She looked past him, straight at Nadia. "You can either show me who you really are, or you can wait outside while we sort this out." And then Catherine did something that changed everything. She reached for Nadia's arm, not rough, but forceful, like she was trying to escort her out. Nadia pulled back, gently but firmly. "Don't touch me." That should have ended it. But Catherine's ego was louder than her training. She took another step and muttered under her breath, "I'm not doing this today." Then she slapped her, hard, right across the face. It wasn't theatrical. It wasn't drawn out. Just one sharp, open-handed hit. Enough to turn heads. Enough to make time stop. Tony gasped. The older couple looked up in disbelief. And Nadia, she didn't yell, didn't retaliate. She just stood there, one hand to her cheek, as the echo of that moment settled into everyone's chest. Tony was the first to speak. "What the hell are you doing?" I was trying to get her to leave," Catherine stammered. "She owns the plane," Tony snapped. Catherine blinked. "What? She's Drive. Nadia Holston," he said. "The new CEO of Vanguard Systems. She's the majority stakeholder in Meridian Lux. This is her jet." And just like that, the balance of power flipped, but the damage was already done. Catherine's face drained of color. The words hit her like turbulence she hadn't seen coming. "She's the CEO." Tony nodded slowly, still staring at her like he couldn't believe what just happened. "Yeah, Nadia Holston, PhD in aerospace engineering. Net worth north of $2 billion. You just laid hands on the woman who owns the company that signs your paychecks." Catherine opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Nadia still hadn't moved. Her hand was down now, her cheek was red, but her expression was unreadable, steady, distant, almost surgical, like a scientist taking notes on an emotional experiment she was no longer participating in. "You assaulted a passenger," Tony said, his voice tight. "You assaulted the owner. You need to sit down right now." Catherine's eyes flicked around the cabin, looking for backup that wasn't coming. The older couple had gone back to pretending to read, but their hands trembled with every page turn. The co-pilot had come out quietly, standing near the cockpit door, arms crossed. Nadia turned and calmly walked back to her seat. She sat down slowly, smoothed her hoodie, and pulled her phone from her pocket again, not to call anyone, just to scroll. It was so ordinary it felt like whiplash. Tony leaned toward her, his voice quiet. "Do you want to delay the flight? We can report it. Escalate to." "No," Nadia said simply. "We're flying." Tony glanced toward Catherine. "She should be removed." Nadia didn't look up. "No. Let her stay." That surprised everyone. "You sure? She's going to sit on this flight like she didn't just make the biggest mistake of her career," Nadia said. "That'll be worse than any headline." Tony gave a tight nod. "Copy." The engines began to roar softly as the pilots started their pre-flight checks. Tony returned to the galley, his body stiff. Catherine stayed frozen near the front for a few seconds longer before she quietly took her jump seat. Nobody said another word. No one apologized. No one asked if Nadia was okay. It was just silence. But it wasn't peace. It was pressure, heavy, pressing against everyone's lungs. The plane lifted off 20 minutes later, smooth and flawless. Catherine fumbled through the safety announcements with a voice that cracked twice. Nobody corrected her. Nobody cared. Nadia sat, legs crossed, head tilted back against the headrest, eyes closed. Not asleep, just thinking. She didn't need revenge. She already had something stronger, patience. But high up in the clouds, every second of that silence was a countdown. 35 minutes into the flight, not a single word had been spoken between Nadia and Catherine. Catherine sat rigid in her jump seat near the galley, fidgeting with the strap of her apron, occasionally glancing up to check if anyone was watching. No one was, but she couldn't shake the weight of what she'd done. Every time she blinked, she saw the look in Nadia's eyes, that cold restraint, that silence louder than any yelling could have been. Tony made himself busy too, folding napkins that didn't need folding, rechecking inventory, refilling a water bottle that was already full. The older couple in the back whispered softly to each other, shooting glances toward the front of the cabin, wondering what kind of drama they'd just paid first-class money to witness. And Nadia, she was still. She hadn't moved much since takeoff. At one point she pulled out a leather notebook and scribbled something with a black pen, not fast, just one line, then closed it again. Then nothing. It was driving Catherine crazy. She stood suddenly and walked toward her with fake composure. "Would you like anything to drink?" she asked. Nadia looked up. There was no anger in her face, no attitude, just a long pause before she answered. Do you think I want something from your hands? Catherine flinched. I just thought I should offer. You thought you could slap me, then bring me sparkling water and think we're square. Catherine's voice shrank. I didn't mean to. You did exactly what you meant to do. The problem is you thought I couldn't respond. That silence came again, thicker this time. I'm sorry, Catherine said, barely audible. Why? I didn't know who you were. Nadia tilted her head, her voice calm. What if I was nobody? What if I was just someone flying private for the first time? What if I didn't have $1 billion company behind me? She let that hang in the air for a moment. You weren't sorry when you thought I was powerless, she continued. You're only sorry now that you think you'll lose something. Catherine's eyes dropped. You're right, I know. She turned her head toward the window. Catherine walked back without another word. Tony raised an eyebrow as she passed, whispering, What did you think was going to happen? I don't know, she murmured. You know that whole plane has cameras, right? He added. Every inch, including the cabin. It's already recorded. She blinked. I forgot. Tony shook his head and returned to the galley. The conversation was over. Nadia sat back, pressing a finger against her cheek for a moment, right where she'd been hit. It didn't hurt anymore, but the bruise wouldn't be physical. It would be policy. Because once they landed, things wouldn't just go back to normal. They'd go exactly the way Nadia wanted them to. The plane flew steady at 40,000 feet, but the cabin felt like it was holding its breath. Catherine sat in the galley, barely blinking, staring into the stainless steel sink like it held answers. Her stomach was in knots. She had worked for Meridian Lux for 6 years, built her reputation from nothing, trained hard, memorized protocol. She knew how to handle celebrities, royalty, even the weird crypto-millionaires who brought iguanas in Louis Vuitton bags. But today she made a mistake so basic, so damaging, it made her question everything she thought she knew about people and herself. Nadia had gone quiet again, flipping slowly through a thick folder she pulled from her bag. Inside were diagrams, proposals, engineering drafts. Tony passed by, glanced down, and recognized the logo, Holston Aerospace. She wasn't just rich, she built things. She invented things. Tony hesitated by her seat. Dr. Holston, I just want to say what happened wasn't okay, and I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Nadia didn't look up. You didn't do it. Still, she closed the folder and finally met his eyes. You ever get tired of pretending like stuff didn't just happen? Tony nodded. Every day. Nadia gave a small half-smile. Then you'll do all right. Just then the cockpit door cracked open. The pilot stepped out, a tall, older man in his 50s, Captain Rob Templeton. He cleared his throat. Dr. Holston, could I speak with you for a moment? Of course. They walked toward the back where there was a private conference room with tinted windows and soundproof walls. Tony followed and held the door, then closed it behind them. Captain Templeton sat across from her at the table. His face was calm but serious. I just got off headset with HQ. They confirmed everything. Catherine's actions. Well, there's no gray area here. Meridian's legal team is already prepping a response. I'm not surprised, Nadia said. He exhaled slowly. I've been flying for 30 years. Never seen anything like what just happened. We owe you a formal apology, and Catherine will be grounded the second we touch down. But Nadia leaned forward slightly. That's not enough. Templeton looked at her carefully. What are you asking for? I'm not just a passenger, she said. I'm the majority shareholder now. I bought controlling interest in Meridian last quarter. This jet is registered to my holding company. That's not a footnote. That's structure. She placed the folder on the table. This is what I was working on mid-flight. A new equity policy, comprehensive retraining, company-wide restructuring on internal bias, enforcement, transparency, and hiring oversight. I was planning to roll it out next quarter. Templeton sat straighter. I think it's time we push it forward, she said. Immediately. Immediately. He nodded. You've got my support. I know I do. Back in the cabin, Catherine stood up when she saw the conference room door open. She tried to look composed, but her eyes gave her away. She watched Nadia step back into the aisle, Captain Templeton following behind her, his face unreadable. Nadia walked past Catherine slowly. Didn't speak. But just before she returned to her seat, she paused, turned slightly, and said over her shoulder, "You don't know who you're talking to." That's the whole problem. Catherine didn't respond, couldn't, because there was nothing left to say. But the silence had changed. Now it was waiting, for landing, for fallout, for reckoning. The flight had 2 hours left. But for Catherine, it already felt like it was over. She didn't know if she should stand, sit, cry, or disappear. Her mind was spiraling, replaying the slap, the way Tony had looked at her, the stillness in Nadia's face. The captain hadn't said a word to her since he returned from the meeting. That scared her more than anything. She peeked toward the front of the cabin. Nadia was back to her folder, calm, focused, as if none of it had happened. Catherine finally stood up and walked over. "Dr. Holston." Nadia didn't respond. "I know you don't owe me anything, but can I say something, please?" Slowly, Nadia closed her folder and looked up. "I'm listening." Catherine stood with her hands clasped in front of her. "I messed up bad, and I don't have an excuse. I judged you. I treated you like you didn't belong, and I didn't even stop to question why I assumed that." Nadia stared at her for a moment, then nodded once, slowly. "I appreciate the honesty," she said. Catherine's voice cracked. "I know I've lost my job. I know that's coming. I just wanted you to hear it from me before the paperwork shows up." Nadia tilted her head. "What's your name?" "Catherine Mallory." "How long have you been in this job?" 6 years. Before that I worked for a smaller charter company out of Scottsdale. Did regional flights, lots of wedding parties and finance bros." Nadia leaned back. "So you've seen all kinds of people." "Yes. And still, I walked onto this plane in a hoodie and sneakers, and your first thought was that I didn't belong." Catherine looked down. "Yes." Nadia didn't raise her voice. She didn't lecture. She just looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You didn't just see me. You saw who you expected me to be." Catherine nodded. "I'll never make that mistake again." "You'll have time to prove that," Nadia said, then turned back to her folder. Tony, watching from the side, stepped closer after Catherine walked away. He leaned in and whispered, "You're letting her keep the job." "No," Nadia said without looking up. "She'll be removed from flights and put on leave immediately." Tony waited. "But if she completes the full retraining program, owns her mistake publicly, and earns her way back through actions, not words, then maybe there's a future." Tony smirked. "That's fair. It's not about fairness. It's about accountability." Just then the seatbelt sign chimed. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our descent in about 20 minutes. Weather in Newark is partly cloudy, 64 degrees. Cabin crew, prepare for landing." As the crew scrambled to finish their final checks, Catherine sat back down and stared straight ahead, not in fear now, but in reflection. Nadia stared out the window, watching the clouds part below. Some people get their lesson in silence. Others get it in front of a camera. But the ones who grow, they listen either way. And this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of what came next. The jet touched down at Newark Liberty just after 3:10 in the afternoon. Smooth landing. No applause, no relief, just quiet tension. On the tarmac, a black SUV waited near the private terminal. 2 security agents in plain clothes stood near the vehicle, scanning the scene, professional and calm. They weren't there for Nadia's protection. They were part of her team. Catherine unbuckled from her jump seat, feeling her knees shake slightly as she stood. She watched Nadia stand, gather her things, and move slowly toward the exit. No urgency, no rush, just deliberate calm. At the top of the stairs, just before stepping off the plane, Nadia paused. She turned back toward Catherine, who was still standing near the galley. "You have a voice," she said. "You work in a place most people never get access to. Use that position for more than just assumptions." Catherine opened her mouth to speak, but Nadia didn't wait. She walked down the stairs and into the SUV. The door closed. "Gone." Tony looked over at Catherine, arms folded. "You okay?" "I don't know." He gave her a look. "It's not about being okay. It's about what you do now." She nodded, biting her lip. "Do you think I can fix this?" Tony sighed. "Depends. You trying to save your job, or change who you are?" Catherine didn't answer. Not right away. Back at Meridian Lux headquarters in Parsippany, Nadia walked straight from the SUV to the boardroom. 6 executives were already seated, shuffling papers, looking nervous. She dropped the folder on the table. Effective immediately, Catherine Mallory is off active duty. Put her into the mandatory realignment program. One executive spoke up. There could be PR fallout. We can spin this, say she misunderstood. Nadia cut him off. No spin. No press release. No cover-up. What happened is what happened. Another executive asked, should we prepare a media response? Nadia sat down at the head of the table. No, she said, we prepare new leadership standards. They went quiet. I don't care how uncomfortable it makes people. We don't change the culture here by hiding mistakes. We change it by holding the mirror up and saying, that's what we were, and here's who we're becoming. One of the assistants scribbled notes furiously. Nadia looked out the window of the boardroom. The plane was still visible on the far end of the tarmac. Her name was now printed under the Meridian logo. The slap wasn't the real story. The silence after it was, and how people chose to break it or not. But for Nadia, silence was no longer acceptable. 2 weeks later, Catherine sat alone in a Meridian training room in Jersey City. No makeup, no uniform, just jeans, a sweater, and a notebook half filled with scribbles and regrets. She watched a training video on implicit bias, real stories, real footage, not corporate fluff. A passenger describing being treated like baggage. A pilot talking about being questioned at his own hangar. A child asking her mom why they look scared when I sit next to them. And then the screen faded to black. A new face appeared. Nadia, straight to camera, calm, clear. If you're watching this, it means you work for a company that I now lead, she said, and that means we hold each other to a higher standard. Catherine sat up straighter. Nadia continued, it's not about perfection. It's about accountability. About asking yourself one hard question every day. Did I treat someone better today because I finally saw them for who they are, not who I assumed they were? The video ended. Catherine closed her notebook and stared at the wall, not because she was lost, but because finally she was starting to see the direction she needed to face. Across the country, on another flight, a young black woman boarded a jet in Sacramento. She wore sneakers and a hoodie. The flight attendant, an older white woman, smiled and said, welcome aboard, drive. Spencer, would you like sparkling water or still? No tension, no second guessing, just respect. The world doesn't change in one day, or one flight, or one slap. But it starts with the people who choose to stop pretending they don't see what's right in front of them. Sometimes it takes being humbled to finally understand what it means to lead. And sometimes the people you underestimate the most are the ones already flying higher than you can imagine. If you've ever been misjudged based on how you look, what you wear, or where you're from, this story is for you. And if you've ever been the one doing the judging, it's not too late to change. Treat people right before you know their title, because real power doesn't announce itself. It just walks in quietly and sits wherever it wants.